in life and in business, we can't operate without assumptions. Here's an assumption. Here's the book, Theory of Constraints, by Eliyahu Goldratt, genius. I could say many things about the book, including that the proofreading is horrible, but the ideas are interesting. Now, here's an assumption. If you let go of something, it will fall. Yes, it did. Is that assumption always true? No, it isn't. For example, suppose I'm designing aircraft. I need to know that if I have a high-powered aircraft and it's going into a dive, if people let go of things, they will not fall. They will tend to go up, or at least up relative to the aircraft. Maybe even more significant if you're getting into rocketry and spacecraft and things like that. But for everyday life and everyday business, the assumption about things will fall if you let go is quite good. And you can't spend your whole life trying to think of exceptions to every possible assumption. On the other hand, you can live and die, or your profits can live and die, by the quality of your assumptions and whether they apply. Now, let's think about a few kinds of assumptions we could have. One kind of assumption is that local efficiencies will add up to overall performance. That is an assumption that's very common, and that the genius I was referring to, Eliyahu Goldratt, has conclusively shown is false. In fact, local efficiencies might well contribute absolutely nothing to the bottom line. And I've done a separate video about this. Now, we get fooled by our assumptions into thinking that the local efficiencies will add up to bottom line improvement. We're fooled by mental habits, we're fooled by our accounting systems, but the fact is we're fooled. And if we want greater productivity, greater profits, we have to be able to challenge that assumption and cope with it, overcome it. Another possible assumption is that the way to get improved performance is to pour more resources into a problem. Now that one's seductive because sometimes it's true, but sometimes it's false. If more resources were a guaranteed path to success, then the country of Israel would have been wiped out several times over because they've repeatedly been outnumbered by enemy armies intent on wiping out Israel, and they've repeatedly fended off the invaders. It's a military example. Same thing happens in business, where stodgy but very rich old businesses will fall down, be wiped out by innovative competitors. So the resources thing can be a faulty assumption. Another one, very seductive, is that today will be the same as it was yesterday, that things are staying the same. The way I like to put it is, the trend is your friend until the end. The end of what? The end of the trend. You don't always know when the trend is going to end, but present trends will continue until they stop continuing. My father used to like to point out, and he's a medical scientist, or he was a medical scientist, he's unfortunately passed away. He liked to point out that according to the trends, it used to be considered that there would be entire hospitals, vast hospitals, devoted to polio victims in iron lungs. There was a distinct trend towards the number of people, how long they were surviving, and so on. And you could predict with reasonable confidence the vast amount of space you would need for people in iron lungs. Instead, what happened is you had a breakthrough in vaccination, and you stopped getting new polio victims. So the trend made a radical change. Same sort of thing happens in business. You have trends, and they end. Then business schools can spend vast amounts of time analyzing why things changed, but the practical business person needs to know they've changed. At the moment, in the movie theaters, superhero movies are very popular. Will that continue? Sure, it'll continue. It'll continue until it stops continuing. Do we know when that will be? No, we do not. So again, you have to be alert. 80-20 thinkers will tell you that if something is working, you should not even necessarily stop to analyze why it's working. You may never know why it's working. But if it's working, you increase what you're doing that's working and get the maximum benefit out of it until it stops working. And there are many other types and examples of assumptions. But we can't spend our life questioning every possible assumption. We might not even realize all the assumptions we have, let alone have the time and the ability to tell which ones are right and which ones are wrong. So where does that leave us? Well, I'd suggest this. Let's focus on identifying and analyzing assumptions when you're dealing with a problem area. For example, you're dealing with a dilemma in business about should I do A or should I do B? And there seem to be good reasons for A and there seem to be good reasons for B. That is where you start looking for and analyzing your assumptions. For example, you consider that it's important to increase your profits, to put more resources into marketing. Why? And here's a way to isolate assumptions. Start asking why, and then you ask the why behind the why. Why will improving your marketing increase your profits? Well, because then more people will buy your stuff. Well, why will more people buy your stuff just because of your marketing? Well, because the marketing will encourage them to try it. And then, here's your assumption, once they try it, they'll like it and want to buy it again. So, one of the assumptions to test in figuring out whether marketing will help is to question the assumption that if they try it, they'll like it. So, in challenging assumptions, I suggest look for areas where you're considering competing approaches, competing ideas of what to do, and start looking for the why behind the why. What is the hidden assumption? And start trying to figure out whether it's right or wrong. Because, although you can't challenge every possible assumption in life, finding the right assumptions to look into and analyzing them correctly can be huge in terms of your profits.